Hi, everyone. We want to welcome you back to the second chapter. Actually, it's going to be the second and third chapter of a book that we're studying together called Union with God by Madame Guyon. And we just want to remind you guys that this is basically a show for folks who are interested in the spirit-filled life and in a life guided by God's Spirit internally. And this may not be a show necessarily for you. And if you kind of want to see where it's come from or where it's going, you can check out the first part of this kind of session that we're doing on Union with God and see if it's for you. Just drop back and enjoy that. We don't aspire, or we aspire to be Spirit-filled, but we're not trying to sell you guys on the fact that we're all there or that we're all that. And also that there's any perfect source for that or any perfect teacher to get you to that point. Because, somehow I have seen there is always something offensive in front of what God wants to do in your life. And be it somebody that God wants you to learn from, there'll always be an offensiveness to them. In order for you to get past that and get over into what He has for you, somehow you've got to get past the offensive stuff. And look, there's stuff in here that we are really enjoying. We don't really understand it all, but there is some good things that are there for the life of Spirit-filled people today, or people interested in being Spirit-filled. That's really excellent. And there's some things that I just don't understand it, and I don't agree with it. But there's a lot of good, and there's so much good that it's a source of.
There's new stuff that
I've
never heard before. And it makes sense.
Some of the stuff that's hard in here, I'm finding really hard, is death to self stuff. I find that
she explains Romans 7. The man who doesn't do the things that he wants to do, and he does do the things he doesn't want to do. But she talks about it as though the only way that can be dealt with is through the inward life and by turning inward.
And the inward life is nothing more than you enjoying God from your spirit. And understanding that there is a real big difference between understanding God from your eyes or from the senses that God gave us and understanding Him deep within spiritually. And this lady really defines those differences.
She goes deep into
that. And so if you're there, then this is going to be a great encouragement to you. It really is. If that's not where you're at, no one's trying to push that on you. Whatever God's trying to do in your life is deep and private between you and Him. Look, 99% of what God is doing in a life is private and personal. We're like icebergs. You hardly see the mass of an iceberg. All you see is that little top that's left from the buoyancy of that humongous chunk of ice. It's not visible. But that's sort of like our lives with God. If everything about your life with God is only what's visible, you probably don't have a very good or very healthy walk with Him. Because a lot of what's really supposed to be happening is supposed to be happening privately and deeply between you and God.
What she says is to trust the invisible parts and not the outside. So a lot of us Christians put value on the outward. And success is by how good you've been today, or what a good person you've been, or if you didn't give in to your temptation. And she talks about it being completely inward and not to rely on yourself to overcome temptations. And that's a hard thing.
That's a hard thing because you learn somehow to enjoy God on a day when you feel you didn't do bad, or you feel you did good. So you're then becoming the judge of whether or not you're going to allow God to enjoy you or to use you just based upon your judgments. And those judgments aren't good enough.
No, they're not.
They're not.
No.
And there has to be an acceptance of God's accepting of you. One of the things I left out that we finished off last week with was the passiveness. And the love of God and how that washes you clean. And the idea in that is that as God draws you to himself, and she said, as you continually do that, make that trip to God, just through making those trips to God, you passively lose all of your worldliness. You just, by constantly coming to God, you don't even have to think of it or concentrate on it or deeply focus on it. That just by making those journeys time and again to God, where you're enjoying him, all the junk in your life leaves your life.
And so, she talks about it as Christ crucifies your flesh. And a lot of times we think we have to crucify our flesh. But she says, as you rest in God, as you seek him, he crucifies the flesh, and that's the time of dryness. She talks about it as though you're tempted and you're thinking, why is my flesh overcoming my spirit? But the thing is, there is no strength even in your own spirit. And she says we rely on our spirits, but our spirit is like a helpless newborn babe. Without the Holy Spirit, we have no help. And she says not to even depend on your own spirit, but on him. And those ideas of dry times I find really hard to understand and to take in, because that's not sort of how we're raised. We're raised to look for the exciting parts, but also we're sort of listening to David that says, why so downcast? Put your hope and trust in God. And that's what she says in this book too. She's not saying anything different than that, but she's saying that dry times will come and that they aren't at all dry. They are just the private times of God at work in your life, strengthening the dependencies between him and your spirit, and destroying the dependencies between him and your soul, even those things about your soul that you think are great. Because some of the worst parts of ourselves are some of the things that we celebrate about ourselves. We think they're great, but in fact they're some of the worst parts of our lives, and they're some of the parts that God is trying hardest to work on and to change. But let's just get into the book here. We're going to get into, this is chapter 2, and that's kind of following some of the things we just said. Near the bottom of chapter 2, page 15. We have seen that you are best rid of distractions by being drawn inwardly to the Lord and not by wrestling with them. Okay, so that's what we were just mentioning, that by making that journey into the Lord's presence and repeating it, somehow the junk in your life begins to disappear. Like she said, not by you facing it directly. Okay? This is almost like, I said to Lem last week, I said it's almost like somebody who is able to clean the house by laughing. Because it's a joyful coming to God that actually cleans your life up. And instead, we think it's a persistent, willfulness on our part that cleans our life up. But it's just the opposite. It's happening as we go to God. One of the things that struck my life, I have been taught to be devoted to God. And that isn't a bad thing. How you do it can be a bad thing, but not wanting to be, that's a good thing. The Bible talks about being devoted to him. But I was getting worn down. I was getting worn out. I was praying a couple hours a day for many years, and reading my Bible through time and time again, over and over and over again. And one morning I was up early before I went off to work. It was about 5 o'clock.
And I started to pray. I was having my devotions with God. It was a big change. This was a major changing point in my life. I started my prayer time, and then that was it. It was over. I had run out of gas. Okay? Whatever was fueling me before, okay, it was now officially over. And I just kind of sat back, and I knew in my heart, oh wow, this feels done. I heard the Lord speak to me, and he said, "How are you doing?" And I was so shocked. I said, "Well, Lord, don't you know?" And then he said back to me, "Yeah, but I want to hear it from you." And that was the beginning of this unwind from me trusting in myself, even in my own spiritual strength, to make this happen instead of in him. But anyway, yeah, that's something that really spoke to me on that. I found that the parts of this second chapter hard because it talked about the dry spell that you're going to go through. Boy, did I ever go through it. I remember telling my mom, I said, "Mom, I don't know what to do. I love the Lord, but I've lost all my impetus and all my desire to pray." And Mom told me, she said, "Corey, that happens. That happens. God is bringing you into something else. He's bringing you into something new." And it's scary. It's very scary when you've been taught that devotion is a strength, and that if you keep those devotions, it's meaningful, and being devoted to God is meaningful. But when he's at work changing your life, it can be very scary, especially when you're concerned about the spiritual parts of life and eternity. And recognize how serious of a matter forever is. And so these things aren't easy in the life of us. When we're changing, oh boy, especially when it's big change, it's scary. And if you're going through any of that, please know that you're not alone. We've been through stuff like that.
Yeah, I had similar experience. We were pursuing faith. At this point, we just come from India, and we had nothing. And we were introduced to faith, and I thought this was my answer. I knew God when I was young. Like, I fell in love with Jesus, and I think I got spirit-filled because I used to speak in tongues. But at this point, I was, we had kids, life was busy, and I just wanted to do the right thing. I went to church, and I did everything I was taught. But without knowing God, faith doesn't make sense. Faith is his virtue, it's his character. I didn't really know God at this time, and I was trying to do everything, like repeat everything, say things of faith, and I will have this and I will have that, but our life was just going downhill, like big time. It was just the opposite. And I was like, "God, don't you love me?" I remember being in church one day and thinking, God doesn't like me, because everyone else was getting their prayers answered, and I just felt unloved by God. And I remember, similar like you, I was praying, and I said to God, I can't do it anymore. But I went through a long time of not praying, and my fun part of life was just going shopping, and I just had no desire towards God. And then I had an encounter later on. But yeah, I went through a long period of dry spell.
And that's God at work. That's God at work in you, and no matter who you are, if you're devoted to a love walk with God, be ready for change. Be ready for change, because if there's one thing the disciples went through, who walked with Jesus, it was change. They went through that for sure. So, at the bottom of page 16, if you were strong, you still could not conquer the weakness of your outer life. And that means, your sinful life, worldly life. Under no circumstances are you able to effectively deal with such things. It is the Lord himself who takes gradual possession of your soul. It is he and he alone who becomes your purifier.
Amen.
Isn't that awesome?
Wow. I believe that.
Oh, yeah.
There is no way self can do it.
No.
There is no way.
And when you're taught that it can, and through deep and strong devotion, that somehow or through abstinence, and don't get me wrong, walking into temptation is a dumb thing to do.
Right.
But in the sense, when you're taught that through your own actions you can purify your life, oh man, it is very hard. It's very, what did you say?
It's damaging.
It's damaging. Yeah, that's the right word. Really, it's that deeply damaging to think you can fix yourself.
Yeah.
This is not a Tony Robbins show.
Yeah.
This is not a fix it, do it yourself show. I think what Lem and I are actually trying to get across here is that those ideas are so ludicrous to the Christian faith that there's a lot of ministries out there that want you to avoid Christianity. And that's true. They introduce you to a greater, stronger self that somehow does all of these great things in your life through becoming a stronger, better, higher, whatever person. And none of that's true. And it's certainly not of the faith to think that's true. To let God clean you up is the best way to get cleaned up. I'm still on that same page, 17, halfway down. All true outward improvement comes only after inward development. Outward improvement is totally dependent on the inwards. I think that's pretty well the same thing. I think it's the same thing we just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything on the next page, 18?
Well, she talks about the cross being your flesh being crucified. And same thing, she says it's not self. You can't put the cross on you. You don't pick a cross. You don't, he puts it on you. Depends on what he thinks where you need it.
Yeah.
And so that's how your flesh gets crucified.
If you're judging your life by someone else's, the Bible calls you a fool. Okay? And this is backing that up.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to go through in your life that is hardship, and somebody calls that your cross because somehow it makes you obedient to God's will. It makes you come in line with God's will. I'm just telling you, don't fall into that trap of looking just for raw human success to prove that you are a success. You don't need that. God is at work in your life. And he does that work through this cross that she talks about. I'll read it to you. Bottom of page 18. As soon as you become sufficiently weak that you cease fashioning your own concept of self-denial, then your Lord will come. He will take over and accomplish the defeat of the flesh more thoroughly than you could ever do. And how does he do this? By dispensing the cross to you according to your measure. The cross you encounter is not a cross which you will choose, but I tell you, we would have never chose our cross. No. But a cross which you receive by his sovereignty over your life. And I got here written here, trust God to purify you, not your concept of self-denial. So when you think, hey, look, what I'm doing here is making me great because I'm staying away from the chocolate cake. I'm a great person. This is making me great. As silly as it sounds, you're becoming a judge of good. You're becoming a judge of what's right and wrong. But she says, God, if you're devoted to him, really, if you really are, if you love him, and if you want more of him, and the full thing to happen in your life, he will bring that cross to you. Okay? Just like he did to Christ. There's something to bear and to bear up under. And you're not trying to re-perform the works of Jesus. You're not. This is, because that's an absolute ridiculous idea. No. Jesus did something great so that we could have all that he got and bought for us. But when it comes to your personal walk with God, somehow some of the acts that Jesus went through in the end, there's a similarness to that unfolding in your life, not in an earning sense, but in a changing sense. How you change in order to walk with God and have this union with God.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's the end of the second chapter. Well, you got anything at the start of the third chapter?
Not Not really.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I've got something a couple pages in.
Okay.
On page 21, after you have been deprived of all past progress, both inward progress and outward progress, all of which might be referred to as non-essential or nonsense, the Lord begins to work on those things which are essential. So I kind of think about Paul when he, finally came to the end of himself, realizing he was a chief Pharisee. He'd done everything right.
Yeah.
He hadn't lived a wantingly immoral life, but he came to the end of all of it and counted it as nothing.
Yeah.
Because it still didn't do anything in his life. And at best, it was keeping him from Christ.
Yeah.
And so he was happy in the end to be rid of all that, and to start the journey of not judging himself good or judging himself bad, but leaving himself open to God.
Yeah.
And I believe that's kind of what she says here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Part way down, page 22. Next, you leave the realm of the seen and are introduced to unseen spiritual realms, where we live by faith and are nourished by love. And later, you leave that spiritual level and enter into naked faith. And that's kind of how she describes what that last level is like. It's a place where you feel alone even though you're not.
Yeah.
And when you come to the end of yourself and begin to realize that in the end your works weren't protecting you, his work was.
Yeah.
And he's there when you think that unless you're there in your strong devotion, he won't do his part or keep his promise. Because we're taught.
Yeah.
We're taught to earn everything, even God's protection. And she graphically says in the end, about how the Lord does some things in your life. I mean, it's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
But she says it's almost like he allows temptation to come back into your life so that you realize how weak you are and rescues you from it.
Yeah.
But constantly reveals to you that your flesh is not what helps you to win this battle. It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's giving yourself over to a spirit-filled life. The soul sometimes unconsciously, this is page 26, clings tightly to its own elevated opinion of what is good. So while you stand there believing that the baser things of your nature are dead, God seemingly resurrects your fleshly nature in order to use it as an instrument to expose the exalted position of your soul. He's determined to subdue not only your flesh, but also your soul in its totality. So, there's another thing that's just really an awesome thing to say. But
self-righteousness.
It is. It's killing it because sometimes you think you've arrived, I guess.
Yeah.
And if there's an ounce of arrogance in you and to you, you certainly haven't.
Yeah.
And here he's saying, or she's saying that God reveals how far you are away when you think you're so close.
Yeah.
You're sort of confident in being a Pharisee. You're like a Pharisee,
Yeah.
Your spirituality is only coming from a good self-image, in the sense that it's not coming from God. It's just coming from you impressing yourself, And so you and your fan club, which is yourself, are happy with you.
Yeah.
But in the end, does that have anything to do with God?
Yeah. And I think the opposite is true too. Like after being close to the Lord, if the only way you keep staying on this path is your closeness. Yeah. Because I think people fall because they depend on their ministry, their success, their spirituality, but really it was their closest to God that kept them holy. Yeah. They start thinking, okay, I won't be able to do those sins anymore because they depend on themselves, but it's only your walk with God, your closeness that keeps you. Yeah. Amen.
Okay, look at page 27. Now, if you are going to be faithful to the growth of the Lord's life, which is planted within you, you must allow your life to be spoiled, wrecked, and even destroyed to the full extent that God desires it to be, and not be anxious about yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, talk to the Word of Faith guys about that, because allowing things in your life to be
you can't decide
no
that your life's going to go a certain way.
Yeah, that's it. If he's in control, then he will remove from you the things that are wrecking your life. And hey, a lot of times those things are positive.
Yeah.
Those things are what the world around you considers success.
Yeah.
What if he touches that like he did with Job?
Yeah.
What if he does that? What if he allows that to come down?
Yeah.
To nothing in your life? Are you still going to be devoted to him? The God that doesn't make you look good. And then that's the reality.
Yeah.
That's the fight.
Yeah.
Is whether or not you're going to stick with God when he doesn't make you look good, when he makes you look foolish. And this is what she said here. Allows your life to be spoiled, wrecked, and even destroyed. You going to stick with him then? I'd love to say I would. I can't be so self-righteous as to say that. I want to.
Yeah.
Man, this world sells itself so good.
Yeah.
Really. It just does. No wonder we get stuff, we buy stuff, it's still working perfectly, and we get rid of it and get another new thing because we're taught that our value comes from that. That's advertising to a T. It's the creation of insecurity. That's what this world is all about. Keeping you buying.
Yeah.
And it can't do that unless you feel you need to have something that you don't need. And God solves that problem, doesn't he? I mean, no wonder the world hates him. He destroys a false and ridiculous economy too. Yeah. That's based upon frivolous things. And but if you're devoted to God, the reality is when those weak things come down, somehow it's not going to make a difference.
Child, tantruming child, and a parent, the child has no idea why he's correcting, the parent is correcting them. But if we allow ourselves to be disciplined and trust that he knows best, I think then you can arrive at the sanctification.
Yeah.
If not, you're just a child tantruming and saying, I want this, I'm not going to let this go.
Yeah.
You can resist. That's what she says. You can resist, and it's going to be unfruitful for you.
Yeah.
But if you let him prune you and sanctify you and crucify your flesh, then you will be sanctified. And that means closeness to God.
Yeah, and he chastens whom he loves.
Yeah.
So when you are being chastened, if you think like your life is being overly watched or chastened, you feel like you're being punished, that is love.
Yeah.
That is closeness with God. That he cares. I don't mean that he wants to punish you, no, but he cares enough about you to discipline you.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you guys, there'd be so many people in this world we live in who would be happy just to have somebody to care.
Yeah.
To care enough even to discipline them. That's care. That's love.
Yeah.
So that's God too at work in your life. Okay, this is the last page. You got anything before then, Love?
No, she talks about that. She said, you must let God work until he is absolutely satisfied. Let the winds, even the tempests, beat upon you from every direction. You must allow such things, even if you're completely submerged, as we often are, beneath the tumultuous billows that blow.
Yeah.
So it's just letting go and complete surrender to being chastened and loved by God. And that's a part of becoming our union with God.
Yeah.
Sufferings, sometimes we don't want that. We just want the good parts, the good feelings.
Yeah.
Being loving and loved by God, but this is a part of him. I always think about that verse that says that it pleased God to bruise him.
Yeah.
I never understand that. But it's part of God. It's part of his love.
Yeah.
And when we receive it, we become part of him.
Yeah. The last page in chapter 3, just near the bottom, she says, you see, during the recesses from God's dealing, your soul takes hope, believing perhaps it can escape. Natural things will take every little opportunity to try to save their own natural life. A drowning man will grab even the blade of a razor in that frantic moment. He doesn't think about the pain that will result from his action. He only sees that there is something out there for which he can grasp. And that's where she leaves us at the end of that third chapter. And just the idea, too, that, your soul does not want anything to do with this pain. And, you are agreeing to God's will when your soul doesn't want to. Yeah. I mean, even what we're doing here, even what we're doing in this little itty-bitty thing here, do you know how little we want to do this? How easy it is to grab a bag of chips and sit down and relax? Oh, yeah, it's easy. I mean, my soul wants to do that. It wants to do that. It wants to relax. It wants to do nothing and enjoy a night. In a week when you've worked hard and you've had more work to do when you came home, who wants to do this? But when God's pushing you in a direction, your soul will give you every reason to say no. Yeah. But in the end, we learn, no, I'm not listening to you. And like she just said, when God holds up for a little bit on the on the sort of on what He's doing in your life for a little bit, and your soul tries to reestablish itself as being in charge, and then God immediately comes back in and says, "No, I'm in charge. You're not." And that's what He will do constantly. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, there's all kinds of deep things. Yeah. Things I couldn't even talk about from that chapter because I just couldn't put it into words or an experience that I had. Yeah. It's something, a lot of things she says are things I don't understand, but a couple things here and there, I'm sure you guys could really share something from this too. From what you've read that has touched your heart. And please feel free to do that. You want to send us an email with something that spoke to you from the book, go right ahead. Okay, so we're going to go on and do the next fourth and fifth chapter, I think, next week. Okay, so if you want to join us, and let's just enjoy a really good book together. And I'm sure God will speak to you through it. It's a classic and something that has actually been part of training teachers and preachers across all kinds of denominations for years and years and years. So it's kind of one of those good Christian books that stood the test of time. Anyway, God bless you guys, and we will see you next week. God bless.